Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Today, we have our business legal primer with Sarah Willey. She is attorney Sarah Willey from Bulkey, Richardson, and Gelinas, located in Springfield, Massachusetts. Sarah's been doing this webinar for us for a long time. Actually, she was doing it in person before, right, Sarah? When everything was in person, now everything is online. So we went from the classroom to online to the computer, but it's still a lot of the same great information. And this time around, because of what's going on with the world and COVID-19, Sarah will be talking a little bit about that as well, in terms of how some of the things that COVID-19 has affected in regards to businesses and law. So I wanted to make sure that you all knew that our program is being funded by the Small Business Administration, the State of Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. And MSBDC is accredited by America's SBDC and hosted by UMass Amherst Eisenberg School of Management. I also wanted you to know that we have a marketing toolbox series that started last week with the basics, and then this week we are moving on to doing more stuff. So unfortunately, I think I have the older flyer here, but today at 1 o'clock we have Facebook One, and all of our marketing series are available. You can sign up right on our website. You can see there that bit.ly link. This is registration for marketing basics. But you can go to our website, msbdc.org/Western Mass, WMASS, and go to the training page, and you'll see all of the webinars, upcoming webinars listed there. So that's a really great series for folks who are looking to really boost their sales this fall and learn to do their own marketing. That series is being co-hosted with many other organizations here in the Valley, including SCORE, the Center for Women Enterprise, Valley Community Development, Common Capital, and Franklin County CDC. So this is a really great group of organizations that come together to put together the marketing series, the Toolbox series. And again, here's our website, msbdc.org. You go to the training page. You go to msbdc.org, services, training, and that's where you'll see all of the webinars listed, including this one for today and many other topics. And here's all of the offices throughout the state. Without further delay, I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Thank you so much for doing this again for us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I have done this seminar in person. I won't say hundreds of times, but a lot. And I'm always very excited to do it and to find out about all the new businesses starting in the area. My name is Sarah Willey. I'm an attorney with Bulkey, Richardson, and Gelinas. We're located in Tower Square complex in Springfield. So today is the business law primer, and it really is a crash course on what used to be the three key topics that areas that I get questions about from people that are starting their businesses. I've now added a fourth topic, which is starting your business in the time of COVID-19, because that certainly has been a game changer. So the topics that we're going to cover today are choice of entity. Am I okay being a sole proprietorship? Is it time to be an LLC? Or should I be a corporation? What's the difference between all the entities? Why do I care, and what's the impact on my business? Intellectual property 101. What's the difference between a trade secret, a patent, copyright, and a trademark? And I'm going to cover the difference between an employee versus an independent contractor. And if you're having to make that decision, that determination, that's great, because that means that your business has grown. And then lastly, I'm going to quickly cover issues related to opening your business in the time of COVID. All right, so choice of business entity. So the first choice of business entity we're going to cover is sole proprietorship. This is the quickest, easiest form of business. It is one owner. That one person, you can wake up in the morning and say, today I am starting my t-shirt design company, or I'm starting my graphics company, whatever it may be, you can wake up in the morning and say, today is the day I am doing it. So it's really quick. It's really easy. Sole proprietorship means that you are the only owner. You make all of the financial and management decisions. There is no separate corporate entity from you, the individual. So this has pros and cons, right? The pro is I can decide this morning that I'm starting my business. If I'm going to be operating my business in a name that is not my own name, so I'm going to choose to be Sarah Willie DBA Butterfly Fields, because I am finally going to go out and start my perennial farm to soothe my perennial flower addiction. I would then need to go to the town or city clerk of the town that I live in and file a DBA certificate. Really low cost, runs depending on the town, kind of around $50. I think some towns are lower, some towns might be more. It changes. I go file the DBA certificate. I then have to make a determination of whether or not I want to obtain a federal tax identification number. So this is sometimes referred to as an employer identification number, an EIN, or an SS4. What this does is it functions as a separate social security number for my business. As a sole proprietor, I can choose to use my own social security number, or I can set up a bank account and an EIN under my DBA's name. So it's your choice. Kind of the metrics that go into it are how many customers or clients that I'm going to have that are going to be asking for me to complete tax forms. Do I want to be providing my social security number, or do I want to have a separate number that is attached with my business? This determination and getting a tax identification number is something that is going to occur with every entity choice, whether it is a sole proprietorship, a limited liability, or a corporation. You can apply for it on your own. There are services out there that will apply for you, but you don't need the services. You can do it. It's really easy. The IRS has a very easy module to lead you through all the answers to the questions that are going to be on the form. So I've included here the link for the IRS's online application. When you go there, it pulls up and starts asking you some very basic questions. And one of them relates to, are you a sole proprietor, or have you formed an LLC or a corporation? So I encourage you to check out that website and to do it yourself, and not use an online service to do it that was just going to charge you money, but actually most times lead you through the exact same question list in order to fill out the form. So after you go to your town clerk, you file your DBA certificate, you obtain a tax identification number, you then go over and open a bank account. So it's really important that even as a sole proprietor, even though there is no separate corporate entity from you, the individual, that you do have a bank account devoted just to your business and its operations. It makes tracking your expenses much easier, and also starts to condition you towards treating your business as separate from you for when you take the next step and move into a LLC form or a corporate form. So why is a sole proprietorship not great, right? There are disadvantages to it being, really quick and easy and low cost. The biggest disadvantage is because there is no corporate entity separate from you, all of the personal liability for the business goes to you individually. So any responsibility under business contracts, so you're buying a piece of equipment, you're leasing office space, the responsibility for those obligations under those contracts runs to you, the individual. So there is no corporate shield. Are there ways to reduce that risk? Yes. One is by having commercial general liability insurance, and many of your customers and clients may require that. The other way is to, if you own your home, to make sure that a homestead deed was filed when you either purchased your home or you refinanced it. You can certainly go ahead and file that after the fact as well. So those are, with a sole proprietorship, the two prime ways of reducing personal liability, but you can't get rid of it entirely. Another disadvantage is that there's limited access to capital, right? So as a sole proprietorship, most times you're going to be looking at using your personal funds, a personal loan, a line of credit, a personal line of credit. Commercial loans to your business are going to be rare and probably not possible at all as a sole proprietorship. In addition, if you're looking for investors, angel investors, they're not going to be wanting to invest in a sole proprietorship. So before I move off of the screen onto the next type of entity, do I have any questions?
No questions at this time. The only question that had come up was to put the link for this obtaining your EIN number in the chat. But I did want to make a quick comment that, and I'm sure you probably already said this, that folks should really talk to their attorney or their accountant as to see which form of ownership makes more sense for them, especially when they're starting and based on their liabilities, on the risk.
Right.
For them, because some folks that I've talked to have like an online business from home, and they're selling widgets, like very simple stuff that may not necessarily something that poses a huge risk. It's not a food product. It's not something that people might get hurt with or whatever. So that's where the insurance comes in. Right. Regardless of the form of ownership, that's where everybody should have some type of commercial liability insurance to cover, for potential lawsuits.
Right. And so when we're talking about, and I absolutely agree, right? So these remarks that I'm making today are general. We're kind of flying through this at a 50,000 foot. This is the things that you should be thinking about, and to give some background knowledge and language for going to talk to one's attorney or one's lawyer. But the decision about whether to be a sole proprietor or form a limited liability company or a corporation, it's really nuanced, and it's really personal and specific to your situation and the type of business you're going to have, as well as your 3, 5, 7 year plan for that business as well. But I do say that there are lots of folks that are starting off as a sole proprietor, and for a lot of businesses, that is fine. It's about right sizing. And often what you see is a direct correlation from the little small business starting out, right? I'm making cupcakes in my kitchen, or I'm selling the perennials because I have way too many flowers and I don't know what to do with them, right? And I'm just selling it to a few people, and then it explodes and it becomes a wild success. And I have to start then buying equipment, moving to a larger space, hiring employees, or I need an infusion of capital. And that's when you really have to start transitioning, because moving up to an LLC or corporate, it's about right sizing what works for you as well as your own personal risk profile. Okay, onward. I'm putting a general partnership up here just to give you background about some of the different choices. I don't expect any of you to voluntarily choose to be a general partnership. And the reason why is that it has essentially unlimited personal liability. So it's like a sole proprietorship, except that you're doing it with friends, right? I see general partnerships in the context of collaborators, friends, sat around one night, they had a great idea for starting a business. They jotted it down on a napkin or a piece of paper, and one of them owns some intellectual property. They made this great invention. Another person has the technical skills to, put up the website. All of a sudden, you have inadvertently a general partnership. And this means that everybody shares equally, share and share alike, and that there's equal unlimited liability. So there's really substantial risks to running forward all excited. If you are starting a business with a friend, a business partner, you need to immediately move forward to thinking about the limited liability company or a corporation in order to have clearly delineated lines regarding ownership of assets and the way the business is going to be run. So I'm going to just kind of move past the general partnership as a bygone kind of entity. I will say there are times when you do have one, which is you maybe have two LLCs that are getting together to pitch a common client. So you see this often in design build, architects and construction companies who have their own independent corporate entities, but form a joint venture in order to pitch a particular client. But really want to avoid it. If you're starting a business with somebody, you're all excited, you really should be taking the next step and doing a hard assessment over which entity you're going to form. All right, the limited liability company. So get lots of questions. Limited liability company or corporation. They're really close in a lot of ways. They have some slight differences. So the limited liability company is a relatively newer form of business. Most states, it's been around for 50 years. A limited liability company is, the owners are called members. The limited liability company is a separate legal person. So this is where that liability shield, in addition to having a commercial insurance policy and a homestead deed, this is where you start to get the added benefit of liability protection. The obligations of the company don't go to you personally anymore. Okay, so what's the downside? Right? It's not quick and easy. There are some steps to form it, right? You have to go through the Secretary of State's office in the state that you choose to form your LLC in. So in Massachusetts, you go to the Massachusetts Secretary of State's, the Corporations Division, okay? $520 a year, so that is the initial filing fee, and that is a yearly fee paid to the Secretary of State's office to maintain the limited liability company. So Massachusetts is actually one of the most, if not the most expensive state for forming an LLC with respect to the filing fee. There has been legislation proposed to bring that filing fee down in order to reduce the barriers to starting a business. That would be a very exciting day if that actually comes to pass. So what are the steps? I'm going to kind of jump ahead for showing you the screens at the Massachusetts Secretary of State's office if you want to form your LLC. So the first thing you always want to do, whether you're forming a LLC or a corporation, is you want to check name availability, right? You want to make sure that you're not choosing a business name that is already in existence, right? So if I want to form Butterfly Fields LLC, I want to go to the Secretary of State's office. I want to go to search the corporate database, and I want to put in minimally Butterfly Fields and see what I come up with. right? So I put it in here and oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of butterfly businesses. Am I seeing a butterfly field? There is no exact hit here. There's not anything even reasonably close to it. There's not a butterfly fields incorporated, designating that there's a corporation. So my filing for a name availability for a corporate entity in of itself would not be rejected by the Secretary of State's office. This evaluation of is my corporate name available in the state that I'm forming my entity is a different analysis than whether or not I can get a trademark to protect a brand known as Butterfly Fields. And I'll cover a bit of that more later. So I've decided that my name is going to be okay. So then I'm going to go back to forming my LLC. So I go back to the Secretary of State's homepage of the Corporation Division, and I go to Filing Online. I click there. It takes me, if you are forming a new entity, click here. They then pulls up all of the different types of corporate entities I can file in Massachusetts. And I want to form a domestic limited liability company. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't highlight it in yellow, but it is the 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet point down on the screenshot on your left. So domestic. Domestic means that this state, Massachusetts, is the birthplace of your LLC. You'll see references to a foreign LLC, and that would be that you formed your LLC or your corporation in a different state, for example, Delaware, and now for business reasons, you need to qualify it to do business in Massachusetts, and that would be a foreign registration. So I click on Certificate of Organization. It pulls me into the actual application form. So kind of two key points on it, because I think most of it's pretty self-explanatory. Box number 3, the general character of your business. This is very general, right? If I'm offering a dog walking service, I can put dog walking service and pet care. I don't have to list out ad nauseum every single activity that I may be doing in connection with my dog walking business. It's very, very broad stroked. So I've seen LLCs where this whole screen is filled out. It doesn't need to be that specific. Box number 5, I always get, what is a resident agent? So the resident agent is the person, and that person can be an individual or an entity tasked with accepting service of process of a lawsuit. If your business is located in Massachusetts, and it's a Massachusetts corporation, but you as the owner and the president, treasurer, clerk do not live in Massachusetts, you do not have a Massachusetts address, you will need to engage a professional service to serve as your registered agent. If you have a Massachusetts address, you can be your own registered agent. So what I see a lot of times is folks that have gone through a filing service instead of going direct to the Secretary of State's office, that corporate filing service will automatically insert itself as your resident agent and charge you a yearly fee for that. Please don't pay that fee. It's not necessary. As long as you have a Massachusetts address, save yourself the money and be your own resident agent. All right, so I'm just showing you the other screens, right? So put in the business address for the manager. So the manager is the person that does the day-to-day operation. Often this is the only owner, right? So you can decide, you know what, I don't want to be a sole proprietor because I'm buying a whole bunch of equipment. I don't want to be personally liable for it. I don't want to sign on to a lease and be personally liable for it. So I'm forming an LLC, but it's still just me by myself. That's okay with an LLC.
We do have a quick question in the
Sure.
chat well, in the Q&A. Where would you go to choose nonprofit corporation setup? Can you explain how someone would go about deciding whether to start a nonprofit versus an LLC, for example?
Right. So if you want to be a not-for-profit organization, you cannot choose an LLC. You have to form a corporation. So I will point out that screen when we walk through how to form a corporation. And indeed, in Massachusetts, there are three types of corporations. You have your traditional corporation, you now have a public benefit corporation, and you have a not-for-profit, with the public benefit corporation being a hybrid between the not-for-profit and the for-profit entity. If I don't cover it again when we get to those slides, just prompt me. So this is just basic information. You sign it, you hit the accept, and then you get the joy of putting your credit card in. So really kind of key points, right? Once you form your LLC, and this is true for a corporation too, once you form a business entity, again, you absolutely need to apply for the EIN or the SS4, because the business entity is deemed under the law to be its own person, separate and unique from you. And then you open a bank account. Really key importance, all contracts and agreements need to be in your LLC's name, right? So I've given an example of how it should look, right? So agreement, and that can be whether it's a service provider agreement, right? You're going to be providing services, or someone's going to be providing services to your business, whether the agreement is a lease, whether that's for real property, right? You're moving into space, or equipment lease, right? So the agreement is between 123 ABC LLC, who can be your client, the creditor, the landlord, right? And my new LLC, Butterfly Fields LLC. I'm going to say where we formed it, a Massachusetts limited liability company. But it's really key that my name, Sarah Willie, is not in the top part of this agreement. If my name is in the top part of this agreement, that means that the contract is being made with me individually, and I become personally liable again for it, right? Then the equal key point, right, is at the end where all the signatures go. The person signing is Butterfly Fields LLC by me in my capacity as the manager, not me individually, not me in any other capacity other than as the manager, the person that runs the LLC. This is true for a corporation as well, right? It would simply be, your corporation would be Butterfly Fields Inc., and I would be signing likely off as president. Any formation questions? Because I'm going to toggle back up to the other key points about forming an LLC.
No, I don't see any questions in the chat, so you may continue.
All right.
Oh, well, there's one question here. Hold on.
Sure.
There's someone that says, what are the must-do things to avoid corporate veil piercing other than the signature?
Right. So the must-do. So the question is about this concept called piercing the corporate veil. So when you form a corporate entity, a limited liability company, or a corporation, you are creating a independent person separate from yourself. In order to keep that person separate from yourself and not have the liabilities attributed, and when the liabilities become attributed to you and no longer to the business, it's called piercing the corporate veil, right? We have this big curtain, kind of like Oz, right? hiding behind the curtain. And you are the owner back there with your assets, and you're keeping them safe and hidden. Creditors can throw open that veil or pierce it if you don't respect the separate and unique person that your LLC or corporation is. And that means it has to have a separate bank account. It has to have a separate tax identification number. All the contracts need to be entered into in its name and signed off in its name. You can't be withdrawing funds willy-nilly and without any basis for it. There needs to be a logical reason of why you're taking out funds. Oh, I'm giving myself a compensation draw, right? It's the same every week, or I have a document that reflects that. I just can't decide that I need to go out and buy Halloween costumes for the kids this year, and there's extra cash in the business account, so I'm just going to take that amount, or I'm going to use the business debit card or credit card to buy something unrelated to the business. That is when the corporation's veil gets pierced. Similarly, if you fail to file for an LLC the annual reports, the corporation veil can be pierced. And actually, this nature of annual reports and yearly documentation is one of the kind of deciding factors that people look at in making the decision between an LLC and a corporation. There are much more yearly paperwork with respect to a corporation than an LLC. So the LLC has its obligation to file its annual report on an annual basis, and that's about it. If you are having a business partner, right? You are having a co-owner or more than one co-owner. You need to create a document that's called an operating agreement. And what this agreement does is it establishes the rights and responsibilities among the owners. If I put $40,000 in, under what circumstances can I get my money out? Can I get my capital contribution out if I decide this really isn't in it for me? I want to go, on a world tour and figure out what I want to do. But I know that I don't want to be a perennial farmer anymore. And co-owners, business partners, it's up to you to do it, right? It also establishes what happens in the event of kind of what I call the 5 Ds, death, disability, debt, divorce, and I just lost the other one, right? Kind of catastrophic things. What happens if your business partner dies or your business partner gets divorced? If there's a disability and they can't continue on in the business, do they get their investment back? Do creditors have a right to their investment in the company and their ownership interest? So an operating agreement sets forth all of those rules. Taxation, a couple different ways that an LLC can get taxed. If it only has one owner, right, it's essentially a sole proprietorship, but it's chosen to have this corporate shield and be its own person. If there's only one owner, it's effectively taxed like a sole proprietorship. It flows straight through to the owner's, essentially owner's tax return. If it has 2 members or more, it effectively is taxed a lot like a partnership. It issues a K-1, and it again flows through to the owner's tax return. An LLC also, it can choose to be taxed as if it were a corporation, meaning that it can make the choice and file a tax form for in all respects for tax purposes to be treated by the IRS as a corporation. When you're kind of getting into those determinations of which one works for me in the business, there's a lot of nuancing and kind of strategy that goes into the business's goals and the owner's both own financial issues and goals there. All right, moving on to corporation. All right, so similar to a LLC, A corporation is its own legal person. It is separate from the people that formed it and owned it. Its owners are called shareholders or stockholders, right? And in an LLC, the owners are called members. Like the LLC, the entity itself is liable for its own debts or obligations. Question?
Yeah, we had a few questions that I was missing. Real quick on the previous slide, is e-commerce required to be either sole proprietor or an LLC?
There's no requirement that you choose a particular form of business, regardless of whether that's a business that solely exists in the e-commerce online world, or whether you have a brick and mortar store, whether you're selling goods or providing services. The assessment really becomes, what is your liability, risk, and tolerance, and how are you going to be looking to get funding in the future?
Right. And as I mentioned earlier, I think I did, where you're selling stuff online, you should always have some type of insurance to cover your business, right? Regardless of the form of entity, and depending on the product that you're selling, right? That's why I said, it's important that you kind of seek some counseling advice in terms of what form of entity you want to do. But I think you answered it well, Sarah, where it's kind of depends, and it's up to the individual at the end of the day what they want to do. But many people start as sole proprietors. They get they still keep everything separated, separate bank accounts. They get a business certificate, an EIN number, they get a business bank account, everything is separate, and they have no issues with that, just staying as a sole proprietor without having to form an LLC. Now, when you start adding employees and you have partners and you have all these other, it may be investors, then you have to look at, other forms of entities other than a sole proprietor. So if you're starting an e-commerce site that requires, investors and requires partners and all this other stuff, sole proprietor is probably not for you.
Right. And I personally have a hard and fast rule, which is if you are hiring employees, you need to be either an LLC or a corporation.
Right. No, that absolutely makes sense, for liability and also for many reasons too. There's another statistic here says, since a sole proprietor setup has liability vulnerabilities for a single owner, like a startup business, for example, is an LLC the best option then?
So an LLC is a fine option. There are, depending on the type of business you are, the type of financing you're looking for. Are you looking for traditional bank financing, or are you looking for venture capital coming in? There are some differences in investor preference versus banking preference in the type of entity. There are also differences in the way that you can control rights among the owners of an LLC from a corporation. So it becomes a very specific analysis of who you're doing business with and why and goals in making that determination.
Right. And someone asked, I don't have the name of the person, but they asked, how should they be paying themselves? So I think that has to do, I'm not sure if that has to do with the sole proprietor or the LLC, but you could, answer that question anyway in terms of how they should be paying themselves.
Right. So very basically, right, even if we're talking about a sole proprietor or an LLC or a corporation that has only one owner, right? I've made the decision that even though it's just me, I'm going to be the only owner of Butterfly Fields. I want added protection, so I've become an LLC or a corporation. The first thing I need to have is I need to have a budget, right? Or an anticipated budget, right? And I'm tweaking that all the time, right? As I have learning experience and cost of goods go up, and I figure out, oh my gosh, I gave this time estimate, and next time I'll learn that it takes 3 times that, so I can change my budget, and I know what my expenses are. I thought, heating for my space or for my greenhouse was going to be X, it turns out that it's triple X, right? So the first one is you have to have a budget, and you have to revise that budget and really pay attention to your numbers. And Samalad, I know that's something that your team actually is really, really good at and helpful with, right? But you're keeping an eye on the prize, which is dollars in your pocket at the end of the day. So then from the next step, right, I'm going to pay myself some form of compensation. So as a sole proprietor, once I kind of have an estimate of what my ongoing costs and expenses are going to be, I can set a weekly or biweekly or monthly draw. I would like to say get into the practice of having some sort of formula in order to do that, not just taking it out as you need it, right? You know, when you get into an LLC, the owners of an LLC, even though they're working in the business, they are not employees. And so they take a draw as well. They don't get a W-2 statement. They're not getting W-2 wages. There's no withholdings made. So again, you set up a draw, and you may have to modify that, but there should be a reason on why you're modifying that. When you choose a corporate entity, the owners, so the stockholders that are working in the business, they actually are employees, and they can receive W-2 wages. So that's wages where all the withholdings have been made, and they get you know, a W-2 at the end of the year that shows, you know, gross as well as with withholdings. And so again, you have to have your budget and set that compensation at a reasonable level, and you can move it as experience dictates, right? It's kind of tough at the beginning, but there should be some formula that I'm not just taking it out because I needed to buy something that wasn't related to my business.
Right, right. And just to reiterate on the sole proprietorship, when we say a draw, it's simply maybe a bank transfer that gets scheduled every month. It could be a, you know, if your cash flows, your money coming in is very steady, and you know you're going to have that amount every month at that time of the month, you know, you can set it up automatically. Or you could do it manually. That time of the month, you go in and then you just transfer some monies into your personal account, and you track it in your accounting that was an owner's draw. And so quite simply, that's all it takes. So we do have a question. Arash, go ahead and ask your question. You can unmute yourself. Arash, did you have a question? I see your hands raised. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the time to ask the questions. So I was a little worried or also curious about, so I have an LLC, and let's say I put money aside for quarterly tax, money for my business needs that I think that I'm going to be spending. Then how much money should I keep, like ballpark figure, like, I don't know, 30%, 40% of my, you know, earnings in the business bank account? Like, are they gonna look into that, saying that, okay, you had paid the tax, you had paid for your business needs, but then you emptied the bank account and paid yourself?
Sarah, you want me to take this one?
I'm happy to, but you know, as my basic is that goes into your tax and financial planning with your advisor, right? Certainly one of the drawbacks of an LLC is that you are taxed on retained earnings. So calculating what your draw is against why you may need to have retained earnings when you'll be taxed on them without receiving dollars in your pocket. You know, it's a balance, and that certainly is a ongoing relationship with your financial advisor on how much your particular business needs. Like, are you planning any large expenditures? Are you planning to buy a significant amount of equipment at a particular point in the year that you need cash readily available for. But Sam?
No, that's a great answer. And I think, Arash, you mentioned that 30% rule of thumb, if you will, for a lot of sole proprietors, setting aside, 60 to 70% of the business monies, keeping those for operations and, keep any extra in the bank account and then paying themselves only 30%. That's just a rule of thumb. But I agree with Sarah, what she said. I mean, it kind of depends on, what your plans are for the business, how much money should stay in the bank account, kind of depends on what your immediate or future plans are for the business if you need any cash reserves. So there's nothing that's rigid or, anything exact, so thank you, Sarah.
Sure. Okay, so kind of on the corporate overview, right? Entity separate from itself, unless we do something that causes the corporate veil to be pierced, so the curtain to be pulled back. It is its own person and it's liable for its debts and obligations, right? Structurally, the owners, the shareholders, they elect the board of directors. The board of directors create the global policy for the business. They elect the officers. You are required to have a president, treasurer, a secretary, formerly known as a clerk, to manage the day-to-day operations. It can be one person, right? If you're a one-person show, you got to have a resident agent, registered agent. One of the kind of drawbacks on the piercing the corporate veil is there's pretty rigid formalities for a corporate entity. You have to have and document your annual meeting of your shareholders, your annual meeting of your board of directors, and you have to file your annual report. Unlike the operating agreement, which of an LLC that sets forth the rights, responsibilities, obligations of the owners, the corporate entity has two documents. It has the bylaws, which in a very basic sense talk about what constitutes quorum, when meetings are going to be held, and what the duties and roles of president, treasurer, clerk, and directors are. Separate from that, you have to have, I recommend you have a what's called a shareholders agreement. And again, this is a document that sets forth rights and obligations of the owners, right? If I don't want to do this anymore, can I get my investment back? If I just decide 6 months in, this isn't what I want to do. I don't want to grow flowers and have a perennial business. You guys are on your own. I want to go be a prima ballerina. So do I get my initial investment back? What happens if I die? What happens if I get divorced, right? Those kind of like a prenuptial for a business really should be discussed among partners, co-owners. So how do I form it? Next item, taxation. So 2 ways of taxing a corporation.
We do have a quick question here. So what if a business and LLC, what if a business and LLC at another country, do I have to have a business entity in Massachusetts here in the US in order to work with wholesale suppliers or private label products? A lot of assessment's going to go into that as far as what choice of entity you should have, what state you should form in, your contacts with the US, the benefits of having a US entity for being able to enforce contracts and getting paid. So that's much larger than our 50,000 view today. Right. So that's a very specific question. But so if you have a business in another country that you want to do business here in the US, you definitely have to seek some very specific legal advice for your type of situation. Yeah. Taxation of a corporation, right? So this is where I find that there's a lot of confusion. When you form your corporation, it is automatically taxed as what's called a C Corp, right? That is the default status. And this means there are 2 levels of taxation. The entity itself pays federal income tax. And then when it distributes the profits
to its shareholders. The shareholders are then taxed on that amount on a personal level, right? So 2 levels of taxation. You can make an election by filing additional forms with the IRS to eliminate the 2 levels of taxation. It's called making an S election, a small business election, right? It makes 1 level of taxation so that the income and loss flows directly through to the individual tax holder. So why wouldn't we want to do this, right? Well, there's restrictions on who can be a shareholder. There's a limited number of shareholders you can have. You can only have 1 class of stock. So again, making the determination goes into who your partners are, who your co-owners are, what your business goals are, what kind of investments are you getting in, where are you getting traditional conditional financing. We're going to be working with VCs looking for venture capital angels. They would want different choices in this area. So it becomes very specifically driving down to your business and business goals. All right.
For the quick question, I just put in the chat for that question that the gentleman had in case in terms of that foreign business. I did put in the chat, we do have the Massachusetts Export Center is part of our program, MSBDC, and they have advisors who are specifically trained on helping businesses who are doing import and exports. You may want to reach out to them. So I put the link in the chat.
Right. Importing and exporting certainly comes with its whole host of regulations separate from the decision about do I form an affiliated or a subsidiary in the US. So, okay, so if I'm forming a Massachusetts corporation and the steps are the same if I'm forming it in a different state like Delaware, the fees are different obviously, but the steps are basically the same, right? I go back to, I want to check my name availability to make sure the name that I want for my business entity is available. I then file articles of organization as opposed to a certificate of formation with the Secretary of State's office. I then get my EIN or SS4. I open my bank account. And then if I'm going to make a tax election, the S tax election, I do that as well. All right, so again, going back, same kind of screen process, file online, new entity, click here. I go to a domestic profit corporation. And again, I fill in the exact name of my corporation is. Again, it has to be a brief purpose. It doesn't have to be an all-inclusive purpose. I select whether I'm going to have stock with a par value, no par value. Either choice is really fine or adequate. It's kind of a relic left over from the 1920s and 1940s to ensure that there was a minimum value for stock. This kind of describes any rules or restrictions. Not typically seeing rules or restrictions here for most businesses, initial businesses. Kind of the basic information, who's the president, who's the treasurer, who's the clerk. Again, you have the resident agent issue as well. Same response, you live in Massachusetts, you have a Massachusetts address, be your own resident agent. Basic information, and again, sign it, and you put in your credit card information. So that kind of is the 50,000 view of choice of entity. I'm just kind of moving us along from a time standpoint. Any kind of last questions about sole proprietor, LLC? Right, oh, so the not-for-profit question. So in Massachusetts, you have 3 choices now. So you have, if you're looking at the left side of the screen, you have the domestic profit corporation, you have a not-for-profit corporation, and you have, 5th one down, a domestic benefit corporation. The domestic benefit corporation is really super brand new in Massachusetts. So it attempts to marry the competing interests of a profit corporation with a not-for-profit, right? So if you're forming your corporation, it's under 156D, it is a for-profit. The goal of the business is to make money. And everybody is tasked with making a profit to benefit the stockholders. A not-for-profit is the opposite, right? The goal is to serve the public generally, has a charitable reason. The focus is not on making money to benefit the owners, but to establish a core public benefit mission. So the Domestic Benefit Corporation, really new, I think it's 5 years old maybe, attempts to marry both. The corporation is still tasked with making a profit. However, in its operation, it has a mission, and in reaching that mission statement, it can make decisions that may not make the highest return for its owners than if it had made a different one. It has to have an outside director that keeps it on task with following its other mission. So it's kind of a hybrid between the two. All right. Any questions moving on? Otherwise, we're going to go to intellectual property and whiz through this. All right, intellectual property, what is it? Okay, so intellectual property is a creation of your mind. It's anything you think up, dream up, right? So it's any type of thing that results from your creativity. It can take lots of forms, right? It can be a new and novel recipe. It can be a formula. It can be a work of art, a song, a story. It can be a contraption or a device. So it is something that is made through your creativity, right? In the broadest sense. So when we're talking about trade secret, copyright, trademark, and patent, all those words denote is the different type of legal protection that is available depending on the form that your creativity takes, right? And so whatever work or invention you come up with, it's going to fit into one of these slots in order to protect it. Sometimes there is a little bit of overlap. I'm going to try to avoid talking too much about the overlap, just to kind of give very clear guidelines on the differences. All right, so a trade secret. All businesses have trade secret. It is the unique information that gives your business its competitive edge. And if that information got out, your business would lose its competitive edge, right? And so, the clear-cut example is the secret formula for Coca-Cola or Pepsi or WD-40, right? The exact ingredients that goes in and the ratios, those are very tightly guarded secrets. So I get lots of questions like saying that's really kind of vague. How do I know if something is a trade secret and I shouldn't be sharing it? So my kind of bright line test is, if you would stand in front of your biggest competitor and freely say blah 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 blah, right? Whatever that information is, and it wouldn't bother you in the slightest, it's not a trade secret. If you get kind of but if I tell them they could, and then my business would be doomed, or right. So if you start to have really kind of sick, anxious feelings at the thought of telling that information, your business information, to your competitor, then you're in the trade secret world, and you should think about not telling it, right? Because the key to a trade secret is in its title. It's a secret. You don't tell anybody. If you have to tell somebody, that somebody should be really limited, and you need to take steps to protect your trade secret. Otherwise, it is no longer a trade secret that can be protected. So how do we protect a trade secret, right? Sure, you've all heard about non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements, NDAs, right? Whether it's called a non-disclosure or it's called a confidentiality agreement, they're the same thing. Key points when you're presented with one is looking at who's going to have access, who needs to have access, who has the ability to access it, you know, on the recipient side. Why am I giving it over? How can I limit, right, how much information I'm giving over, describing the purpose, the reason why it can be used. I see still a lot of NDAs coming through that say, that have a requirement that if the disclosing party is providing confidential information or trade secrets, they need to stamp it, mark it, or identify it as such. That's a high bar for a lot of small businesses to meet. It requires a significant degree of internal record keeping and maintenance, and kind of no slip-ups. My preference is that instead of the requirement to market, that there is a kind of release valve or a safe harbor that says, you know, in the event that we fail to market, if a reasonable person in our industry or in the same line of business would understand that this is confidential, you know, confidentiality won't be lost just because we failed to market in an instance. And this also goes to verbal disclosures, right? So I often see in NDAs that there's a requirement that if you have a meeting or you give a tour of your space and you verbally disclose confidential information or a trade secret, that the recipient requires the disclosing party to follow up in writing within 30 days, specifically disclosing what was verbally disclosed. Again, that's a really, as fast as our businesses go, that's a really high bar to meet. So I absolutely encourage you to look for a safe harbor, which is if a reasonable person in this industry should know that this was a trade secret or confidential information, it will continue to be treated as such. So secondarily, I see time limitations, right? So a secret is a secret forever, right? It is a secret until the business owner decides it's not a secret and they release it. Somebody else cannot arbitrarily or should not arbitrarily decide when your secret is no longer secret, right? You know, if you think through the impact on, you know, some of the big businesses, right? Coca-Cola, makers of WD-40, if there was a limitation, well, we're only going to keep your trade secret regarding your formula secret for 3 years, right? That it's a non-starter for me. There is a separation between business confidential information and what is deemed to be a trade secret under the law, under the Uniform Trade Secret Act. I will concede sometimes that general confidential information, general business information that we don't want widely circulated, okay, we'll allow that to only be held in secrecy for a limited duration, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. But if something is defined as a trade secret under the Uniform Trade Secret Act as adopted in whichever state you choose to follow, that will exist in perpetuity and needs to be protected by the recipient in perpetuity. So if you're presented with NDAs, look for those key points and those separations. Also make sure that the person that's signing the agreement actually has sufficient authority, right? You're really looking for someone that is vice president or higher, right? That there is ample corporate authority to sign. Okay, internally, so that's kind of in our external relationships with potential business partners, potential suppliers, people we need to make our product or make a part of our product. You also, in connection with your employees, should be having employees also sign a NDA acknowledging their obligations to keep secret and not use the company's information other than for the benefit of the company. I'm just checking time over here. Any questions about trade secrets before I move on? Okay, awesome. Oh, oh, okay, all set?
Sorry, I was saying no questions.
Oh, okay.
I was going like, no questions.
All right, so I put patents after trade secrets because they are the opposite of each other, right? So in order to protect a trade secret, you have to keep it secret. It's don't tell anybody unless you really have to, and then you have to take these added steps to keep it secret, like having the NDA. All right, so a patent is on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? In exchange for telling everybody in the world how to make your invention in detail, right? The government protects your exclusive right for a period of years, right? So 20 years. So trade secrets, doing an NDA, pretty simple. I gave you like the key points to look at if you're presented with one, or the key points to think about if you're developing one. Patent, really difficult to go on your own with this. So it's an extensive process to file for patent protection. It's lengthy, it can be costly. But if you've made an invention, a useful thing that is subject to patent, or you even think that it is subject to, maybe subject to patent protection, you need to speak with a patent attorney as soon as possible. And here's the reason why. In 2012, under the America Invents Act, there was a significant change. It used to be that the person that made the invention, regardless of when they filed a patent application, was deemed to be the owner of that invention. We moved away from the first to create rule to the first to file rule. And now the party that files an application with the USPTO first, even if they're not the inventor, has senior rights. And to try and displace someone that's filed first and their senior rights is really cost prohibitive for most businesses. In addition, you only have 12 months from the time you put your invention out into the public in which to file for patent protection. Otherwise, you can never get a patent on it. The right goes away, right? So if you're writing an academic article about your invention, or you've done a prototype and you've taken it to a trade show to see if there's any interest in dealers and distributors, they want to pick it up. From that moment that you display it and you put it out into the public, your time clock starts to tick and you lose the right. Also, because of the first to file rule, if you are putting your invention out into the public eye, there are companies that rush to figure out how you did it and knock it off, and they can get your patent filed within a couple of days and take the senior position over you. So really, if you think you've invented something that may be subject to a patent protection, you need to talk to a patent attorney as soon as possible. All right, so what helps, right? If you have employees that are working for you, again, you should have, just like you have a confidentiality agreement with them, you can wrap it up into an IP ownership agreement. They have to sign a writing that talks about who owns inventions that are made, or if you made the invention yourself, if they make improvements upon it, right? Make sure ownership is very clear in a document. Also, documenting the creation point, date, time, the concept of an engineering notebook. again, not just like with employees, but if you're working with an outside partner, right? That makes an improvement upon your invention. Who owns it? Who has the right to use it if they participated in making your thing better? So key thoughts to think about. Any questions on patent before I move on?
Let's see here. Yeah, no questions so far, but I did want to ask your opinion real quick about because folks when they invent something, right, they say it's, well, two parts. They say patent pending, but they just have a provisional patent, which you could say that you have a patent pending, but some people just say they have a patent, when it's just provisional, it's that 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is in terms of enforcing that patent, I think you mentioned that about the cost of enforcing patents. I'm not really sure if you did,
Right. Well,
but
I was
tell us a
going to say,
little bit about that.
okay, so the one is the first to file rule, right? You have this, you invent it. If you don't file first, so you go to a trade show and there's a company there and they essentially knock it off and file a patent on it within 72 hours, it happens. For you to say, oh my gosh, no, I'm the inventor of that. I should own it, right? For you to knock them out of that slot as the first to file is really difficult and probably for your startup company, completely cost prohibitive. Down the road, when you have patents and patent portfolio, for most businesses, I like to think of patents being used defensively and not offensively. And by defensively means you have a patent, and because you have a patent, no bullies can tell you that you have to stop making your product. A lot of long, hard thought and number crunching has to go into whether or not you are going to file a patent infringement suit against another business to stop them from making something that is similar or that may infringe your patent. And I say this because anytime your business uses legal services, and it's absolutely necessary to use legal services, and legal services should be included in your budget, your startup budget, right? And that budget changes based on what you do in your risk profile. But anytime you use legal services, there has to be a return on that investment, right? Because you could take the dollars that you're going to spend to initiate a patent infringement suit, and you could use them differently. You could use them for a completely awesome marketing campaign, right? That you completely saturate all of the marketing venues with the best, classiest, Class A actor, actress, ads, right? And get ahead of someone that has a potentially infringing product. You could dump that money into research and development, making it bigger and better. You could dump it into streamlining your processes, hiring more people so that you're getting your product faster. You have higher customer service. People like your business more because you are so attentive. I'm obviously not saying that there aren't times when you want to file a patent suit. There absolutely are times, but it's all about the dollars, right? And having a business, your goal, when you're having a for-profit business, your goal is dollars in your pocket, right? And so anytime you're sending out money, there has to be a financial justification for it, and there has to be a return on the investment of those dollars. Does that cover it?
Yep, you did. Thank you.
All right. Moving away from patents, copyright, right? So a trade secret is information that gives you the competitive edge. A patent is protection for a useful thing. A copyright protects works of authorship, right? So authorship's a little bit little bit broad, right? It's not simply the written or the typed word, right? So it includes music, it includes works of art and photographs, but it's the concept of authorship as opposed to a thing or information that is secret, right? So for most people, we're thinking about our websites, articles you write, instruction manuals, recipes. Those will be the kind of the most common other after, books and musical compositions, right? So your copyright exists from the moment, like I used to say, like when pen touches paper, but I suppose it's, I talk into my cell phone and I create my work of authorship, or, I type on my keyboard. But from the moment your pen touches paper, right, or you take that photograph and you print it, as soon as that work is outside of your mind and it's expressed in a tangible form, you have a copyright in it. The issue becomes enforcing the copyright. And if you want to enforce someone to stop them from using it, from infringing upon your work, then you need to file with the United States Copyright Office. Okay, you guys have seen it all the time, right? It's at the bottom of websites. It's when you open up a book or a magazine. So you see the C in the circle, that means copyright. You see the year, and then you see who owns it, right? So like if you have your website, I should be seeing the C, the year that your website was created. If you're making improvements or changes, like you're posting a blog on it all the time, it may be a year, 2019 to 2020. Next year, if you update it, it's going to be 2019 to 2021. And then either your name, if you're a sole proprietor, or if you formed an LLC or a corporation, the LLC or corporation's name right down there. Okay. United States Copyright Office, if you're going to seek more protection, and in order to bring an infringement case, you have to file with them. Really easy, right? So trade secret, gave you the key points to look at for an NDA. Patent, you can't go it on your own. Got to seek patent counsel. Copyright, you can probably do this on your own. The Copyright Office has a really user-friendly dashboard now, right? You pulls up a screen and it says, I have a book, I have a song, I have a manuscript, right? I have a architectural drawing. And so you click it and then it leads you on. Really easy, really inexpensive in the context of filing fees and how expensive things can get. I think it starts now at $35 and like on the high end, it's $110. So this is something you can do on your own, right? Okay, employees, again, your employee agreement, where we talk about keeping the business's information confidential, only using it for the business, where we talk about if the employee creates anything, makes any inventions, the business is going to own it. We're also going to talk about copyright, right? Even though the employer owns the copyright in employee works, I always like to have it in the document. You should have it also too with your outside consultants and contractors, right? So you are hiring someone to do web design. Even though you're specifically commissioning them to do it, you need to have a written agreement specifying that ownership. Again, it's just documentation, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. Okay, I think I covered everything. I am about to actually be able to finish all the segments for once within the time limit. Okay, fair use. I'm just going to bring this up. Like I get, oh my goodness, I saw so-and-so like using, they took part of my book or they took part of my article. Okay, so
you see that a lot on YouTube. Fair use being used because there's a lot of people creating content on YouTube. So this is a big one.
Right. Okay, so again, it's really, really specific, okay? And again, so this goes to also the cost of doing business and the cost of enforcement, right? A lot of times when people are using your stuff, it's because they are fans. And if you can reach out to them and make it a win-win with, hey, I just saw that you've taken, you've taken my chapter 2 and put it into your blog. I'm really, really flattered, right? So that you reach out. Can you make a positive relationship? Can you have them become a dealer distributor? Can you have them become a blogger or an Instagrammer, right? So before you wage war, is there a beneficial relationship? Because this is fan flattery, or there's going to be synergy between your business and them. Please don't automatically go on the war path of like, oh my God, they've taken my stuff. Well, why have they taken your stuff? Are they truly trying to steal it? Or can you get a positive relationship out of it, right? So there are times when you want to cease and desist, that obviously is there. But again, right, goes back to how does this affect my business and what is the best use of my money, right? Do I just want attribution? People can use small snippets, parody, comedy, news reporting for teaching purposes, right? It goes into the analysis of the reason, commercial versus nonprofit, right? You have Saturday Night Live and Mad Magazine, right? That's like parody all day long, right? So there's definitely an analysis that goes into somebody else's of use and the underlying reasons for the use. Okay, trademark. So, trade secret, protecting confidential information. Patent, protecting a invention, a device, a useful thingy, right? Copyright, the written work or a created work. Trademark, that is your brand, right? Trademark is the form of protection for your brand name, your brand logo, your catchphrase or symbol that drives customers towards your brand and lets them know that yes, that this is the product that they want to buy because they attribute particular positive elements with it, right? So, very formally, a trademark is a word, name, symbol, logo, sound, smell, color, device used or intended to be used to identify and distinguish your source of goods and services, okay? 3 types of trademarks. There's the word, right? I am just protecting butterfly fields. I'm not claiming any particular style, I'm not claiming particular color. I don't have it, rainbow and italicized. I'm just protecting butterfly fields. That's just a plain word mark, right? Design mark, right? I have my trademark butterfly fields and I have some wings in rainbow colors coming out with little bees up top, right? That's a design. Then I have the combined mark, the words plus a design. Not something that you have to necessarily agonize over. If you were to file your trademark application, there's a button that asks you, do you just have words or are you claiming color, font, or a design element, right? So kind of basic. Okay. I'm going to talk about also 3 ways to protect it. And I'll call it good, better, best. And that's no cost, low cost, more cost. And again, this kind of goes with our hill of sophistication, sole proprietor, then moving up to LLC corporation, right? Right sizing the protection that fits your business as it is now and where it intends to go. So, trademark. The first to use a word, name, symbol, logo in commerce in connection with driving customers to the business owns it, right? It's a first use. We can look at the kind of the process of it of 4 steps. I'm choosing my trademark. I'm going to assess my availability. I make the determination where I'm going to file it. I prepare and file my application. I respond to the USPTO if that's where I'm going. And then I have post-registration maintenance, right? So if I'm choosing a trademark, I want it to be distinctive, unique, and memorable to consumers. And we talk about trademarks in being strong versus weak. And I've kind of broken it up for how it lays out what makes a trademark strong, right? It's unique, it's made up, it's arbitrary, it has a double meaning. So suggestive, it wasn't someone's abandoned trademark. Weak, it's generic. You can't get a trademark, the word chair for a chair, right? So this is where people say, well, what about Apple? Well, Apple is for a computer, right? Couldn't trademark Apple for an actual Apple, but because it's Apple being applied to a computer, it becomes unique and distinctive. Your real goal is to drive people towards your brand and to make it memorable, that when they see that logo, they have to go over to that side of the mall and see, oh my gosh, that's my favorite brand, right? When you catch it out of your eyes, you instantly know what it is. Okay, so choosing a trademark is really hard. It's agonizing. It's really hard to come up with a good trademark. Okay, once you have a trademark you love, how do you know it's available, right? First, I would type it into the internet. I would do an internet search, a Google search, right? And see what it comes up with. If I want to trademark butterfly fields for my perennial farm, and for, I would type it in and see what comes up. Are there other businesses near or far that are using it? Well, how are they using it, right? I can look at the online yellow pages. I can look at the business trade name directories. I can go to the Secretary of State's office. I can go to the USPTO. I mean, minimally, you need to be looking, you have to minimally plug it in. I would recommend going to the USPTO and typing it in. If you don't want to do it, there are professional services that can help you search. Searching for a word mark is a lot on your own, is pretty easy. Once you add a design element to it, it becomes much more difficult to do that. And that's probably where you would want a professional service, because there's a whole unique descriptive language for describing what a logo or symbol looks like, and it's not necessarily intuitive.
So we do have a question on this part. Sarah, in your opinion, how important is for a business, small business, to protect their name or logo?
It depends on, it depends on size and notoriety, right? Rebranding, it's dollars in. And what your ultimate goals are. If you know that, and I'm going to move to, because of the question where it goes. There's 3 levels of protection, right? There's common law. I have my trademark, Butterfly Fields. I've put up my website. I have some shirts. I have it on my brochures. I've had it put on the pots that I'm potting my perennials in. I don't want to do anything else. But I use it. I have common law protection. So another perennial store within the Pioneer Valley wouldn't be able to call themselves Butterfly Fields, right? We would get into a fight. Common law is free. It automatically rises as soon as you use it in commerce, but it's not perfect. Your protection is only limited to the geographic area that you can show your consumer bases. And there is unsettled about, oh my gosh, well, I'm an internet-based business, I'm a website business. There's some gray area there about how does this change common law and the geographic area. But I tell people all the time, you got it, you plugged it into the internet, you don't see any obvious conflicts, then put the TM symbol next to it, right? That's the stake. I'm claiming a trademark, and document your date of first use. So on September 10th, 2020, I rolled it out on my website. In addition, I put it on my planting buckets that I sell my perennials in, and take a photograph, right? And so you have a documentation of that. So free, good, not perfect. So what would I be able to do? Stop another business within this corridor, the Pioneer Valley. And there's a lot of businesses that never want to grow, right? They want to be here in Western Mass. They want to be on the 91 corridor, and that's totally fine. If you think that you're going to grow, but you're not going to go national, you're not going to be worried about butterfly fields in Washington State, right? But you wouldn't want a butterfly fields to be up on the North Shore, down on Cape Cod. You can then look at state registration. You can file for trademark protection with the Massachusetts Secretary of State's. Really inexpensive. Filing fees about $50. Pretty explanatory, the form. I find most people can really do this themselves. Similarly, if you know your business is only going to be Northern Connecticut, Massachusetts, maybe Vermont, you could file in those 3 states, have protection in those states, and it's probably still going to be less than pursuing a federal registration. If you have a bigger brand, you have a larger business plan, right? And you're going to be selling around the country, or you have a product that is subject to being knocked off or counterfeited, you're going to want to do a federal registration, which provides broad protection in the United States and the territories, right? So you have to go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, uspto.gov, to file an application. It gets costly, and it gets costly because even if you're filing one application, you have to select the market or the channel of commerce in which you're going to do business. That's called international class. So you have to identify the nature of your goods or services and declare them. So like, for example, if I look and I type in the word Delta to the USPTO, I can see there's a trademark for Delta Airlines. I can see there's a trademark for Delta Faucets. I can see there's 10 billion trademarks relating to Delta 9 for cannabis related products and services, right? So just because I have a word that I'm using as a brand name, it doesn't mean that I can stop every other business from using it. I have to declare the channels of commerce in which I'm seeking protection. So there's 34 for tangible products for goods. I've included them here. It's not intuitive. And then there's an additional 10 classes for services. Each class that I select with my application has a minimum filing fee of $225. So it's very conceivable that I may want to be in more than one class, right? So if I'm, doing clothing, footwear, headwear, right? Baseball caps. And if I want to do baseball caps and sneakers, but I also am tying that in with my toys I want to sell, I may be in 2 classes right away. There is a strategy. Most startup businesses I work with are very budget conscious. And so we kind of look at the overall goals of what do we need now to establish our brand and protect that brand. And then, okay, so what's the next one we need to do? And then the next one we add on when we have sufficient revenue to support the expense associated with it. And then certainly there's the nature of international registration, which is also available if you're going global.
Great. Are you going to cover international registration a little bit, or can I ask a question?
So you can file internationally. There's 2 ways of doing it. You can do it under what's called the Madrid Protocol and essentially file through the USPTO, or you can file direct in the country itself. There is a single application for EU, which covers all of the EU nations. There's a dynamic that goes on about whether I want to file directly in the country or I want to file more broadly. But it's available. Again, right, cost, benefit, what are my business goals?
Great. So the question that we have here in the Q&A is, there's an attendee who's looking to buy a business that once had a copyright or trademark. They let it go, so no one has it right now. And she knows at least 2 other businesses in the area that have a similar product. Is there a way for her to get that back before she buys the business? So she
I'm hearing a couple things, right? I heard copyright, trademark, and then I heard similar product, right? And so similar product would be patent. So if you're buying a business and part of the purchase price relates to the trademark portfolio or the patents or the copyrights, then as part of your due diligence, you should absolutely know whether they're valid or there's any challenges to them or any infringement actions, so that you can assess whether you're paying the right price for that business. When a trademark has lapsed or been abandoned, there is a window of time that you basically have it's not automatic, but you have an automatic right to revive it. If no one is using a trademark, you can, and it's been abandoned beyond the revival period, then you could file anew. But again, that there's going to be an assessment done by the trademark examiner, by the government, on whether or not somebody else has filed a valid trademark in the time that would cause substantial confusion, right? Did I get at the question?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's the other question here. How does one go about getting a one-on-one legal consultation? And does SBDC, SCORE, SBA have any upcoming legal programs and clinics? So I will tell you guys right now, to get a legal consultation, I mean, you can reach out to local attorneys such as Sarah. When you meet with a business advisor in our office, we don't give legal advice. Someone had asked before if we do NDC agreements, non-competes and things like that. We don't draft those for you. You really have to go through an attorney. We can kind of steer you in the direction of what should be in it, things that you want to, consider, whether or not you need one, things like that. But at the end of the day, the decision to have those documents, lies with you, and you need to seek legal advice. We're not going to say yes or no. We're just going to give you some information, and we're going to try to educate you so you can make the best educated decision possible. That's our job as an advisor. Not to tell you what to do, but to give you as much information as we can so you can make the best decision possible based on your situation. So one-on-one legal advice, you have to go through directly to an attorney. We have a list of attorneys that are local that we've talked to, that we can, when you meet with an advisor, we can kind of refer you to depending on your situation. They all have different specialties. Upcoming legal programs, I think, are we doing one more of these this year? Sarah, I think we are.
I have one on the calendar for November.
There you go. Okay, so we have another one of these coming up in November, but it's going to be pretty much the same as today. So legal clinics, who does that? Right now, Western New England University has a small business legal clinic.
Yep.
So that's WNEU, Western New England University. If you're interested in that information, I'll see if I can put a link in the chat for you guys who are interested in that. That's definitely, I believe they provide free business clinics, and mostly targeted towards lower income, more moderate income business owners. So you have to meet some type of income eligibility to enter into that program. So I'm not aware of, I think lawyers for civil rights, I think, and there might be others that you might be aware of, Sarah, that might offer some kind of free legal advice.
Western New England is the primary one that I'm aware of.
Okay, and you have some connections to the university, don't you?
I do, yes, that is where I went to law school.
That's when you went to law school, so there you go. So folks, that's a place to try check out first. So that answered that question. Okay, so you can continue.
Okay, so I kind of covered the three types of protection, right? So, and we're talking, free, low cost, and more expensive. Even at the more expensive level, right? The driving expense is the filing fees. It's kind of 50-50. I do have some clients that are successful in filing their own USPTO applications, but they have spent significant time using the USPTO online tutorials. So if that is something that you're contemplating doing on your own, I highly recommend that you watch all the tutorials first. In order to prepare. I'm just looking at time, I could go back into kind of the nuances of making a decision regarding the trade, selecting a trademark, but I think that we'll be out of time. I know you'll have the slides, so I'll just leave the tips. They're kind of self-explanative. Okay. Right. So again, this is kind of the same with your analysis of any type of IP protection, right? What if someone infringes your trademark, your patent, your copyright, right? Again, you have to make a business decision about the best way to tackle it. Is there a harmonious way that can benefit both parties, and it can be a win-win, or do you need to go down the cease and desist and litigation road, or is it more economically prudent for you to simply rebrand? All options that are on the table, and it's really, really unique and fact specific to your business. All right, employee versus independent contractor. If you are making this determination and you are agonizing over this, it's actually a good thing because it means that your business has grown enough that you need help, and that is wonderful. And I say that to sugarcoat what is often a very painful topic for most businesses. So Massachusetts has one of the most restrictive interpretations or paradigms for determining employee versus independent contractor status in the US. It is significantly more restrictive than the Department of Labor IRS, which I think has 36 different prongs that they consider. Massachusetts has a 3-prong test. I put the prongs out there. The worker, the person that's being hired, has to be free from control and direction in the performance of the services provided, both as written in the contract and in fact as they're actually performed as the relationship goes on. The service has to be outside of the employing party's usual course of business. So if I am a painting company and I'm hiring painters to paint, they're performing a service. They're employees, right? I can't have a business if they're at the core of what my business does with a very, very, very limited set of circumstances. They're going to be an employee, right? And that worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, profession, or business, right? And so kind of key things to look at, right, for making the assessment, right, is the person I'm hiring providing the services to a business other than yours, right? do they have multiple businesses which they're providing services for, right? If you're their sole source of income and they're not out actively seeking other customers and clients, it's going to lean towards being an employee. And there is a presumption in Massachusetts that the person is an employee, and it is the employer's obligation to refute this presumption, right? So, you know, do they provide the services for other businesses? Do they have their own workers' compensation insurance? Are they paying into the state fund? Are they paying into the unemployment fund? Do they have an unemployment insurance rating? Do they have their own commercial liability insurance, right? So all of the things that you and your business have, if someone is truly an independent contractor with their own established business, they have those same elements as well, right? They have their own tools of the trade. They have their own computer, and they have a phone number. They have a website. They are members of, you know, various organizations to develop a client base. So that's kind of where your analysis should go. So why does it matter? So when a worker is misclassified as an independent contractor, there are significant civil and criminal liabilities, and enforcement is really, really, really active, both through the Attorney General's office, as well as there is a private right of action for what generally amounts to being a wage law violation. That provides for treble damages and attorney's fees. So kind of some key points. The fact that I'm hiring someone to help out 2 hours a week, every other week, that doesn't make them an independent contractor. That makes them a part-time employee. The fact that I'm hiring them only to help with a rush project, it doesn't make them an independent contractor. It makes them a short-term project-specific employee, right? So they can be full-time, part-time, super part-time, project-specific, seasonal. The inconsistent nature doesn't eliminate their status as an employee. It's what they actually do for you that determines employee status, right? So as an employer, you're obligated to withhold taxes, supply workers' comp insurance, contribute to unemployment compensation. You have, you know, obligations under the earned sick time, the paid medical and family leave. If more than 50% of your workers are on an independent contractor basis and a 1099 basis, you are actually obligated to provide them with paid medical family leave as well. You have obligations under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, so the FFCRA. Right, and if you fail to do any of these in misclassification, again, you have liability arising from it. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and I totally understand that it's really burdensome to bring someone on for a very few hours, right? And to bring someone on as an employee, but the costs don't outweigh the benefit with the potential liability that exists. Any questions about classification?
Don't see any questions right now.
Okay. All right. So if you are starting a business now, that is wonderful. It's also unique, right? Because of COVID-19. And that's brought about some unique challenges. So you need to be really aware of the state's requirements for operating your business during this time. So you need to go to the Commonwealth's COVID-19 website. I provided the link. Check it frequently, as well as the link for reopening business. There are sector-specific protocols and best practices. So for construction, manufacturing, office spaces, I have the list there. Your business needs to adhere. If you are in a phase 4 business, you're going to have to delay your opening until we reach phase for. Enforcement has really kicked up in the last 3 weeks regarding following the requirements and the minimum safety standards, right? So what are the minimum safety standards? You minimally need to have a COVID-19 control plan. There is online at the state a basic template control plan as a starting point for your business. You also need, if you have a brick and mortar, to display your compliance attestation poster. That too is available online. And if you're brick and mortar and you have you have workers, there are employee posters to be posted as well. Because COVID-19, the research and science, as well as the number of positive cases changes on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. You should sign up for updates to make sure that you're getting the most current information that applies to your business from the state. Any questions? I think I have just rolled it in under the wire.
Yeah, that's okay. I see two questions here on the Q&A. Let's see. Online legal resources. Okay, so they were looking, never mind. They were looking for online legal sources for small businesses. Is there any you would recommend?
So for industry, a variety of industries have their own resources. So for example, like I believe it's the Mass Realtors Association and like the Insurance Companies Associations, right? So different associations have resources available through those organizations. So if you fit into a specific type of grouping, there's a industry league or trade league. I would check with them regarding the resources. Certainly, looking at the state of Massachusetts, at the Commonwealth website, at the Secretary of State, there's a lot of question and answers that are available there for forming your corporate entity. I guess.
Yeah, and so specifically, they were thinking about some of the topics covered by you on this webinar. If there's other places that they can go for information, and specifically like in regards to trademarks and intellectual property uses and contracts. One that comes to mind real quick, I believe USPTO does have a YouTube channel. And
right.
They have some webinars there, so that's a good place to go to online.
Right. So when I was referring to the tutorials, that's what I was referring to. They certainly, in addition to their webinars and their tutorial, their recorded tutorials, if you type in a question, they have facts about copyright or facts about trademarks. The Copyright Office, if you type in tell me about architectural works, or tell me about music, or tell me about sculptures, it will pull it right up, the information about how to protect it in a kind of very easy to read brochure. So those resources are really good.
Right, and I have here an interesting question from the person who's looking to buy a business. I guess the business that they're looking to buy is already open and running. Their question is, do they need to go through the COVID reopening procedures or follow those procedures that you put on the website, on your presentation?
So once your business opens and it's basically anything more than online, right? And you interact with people, you have to follow the reopening procedures, right? So if you have any degree of brick and mortar, manufacturing, whether it's a yoga studio or you're, sewing, making clothes, you have to look at the particular industry and follow them.
Right. And what I would also say is that you want to do your homework, right? You're looking to purchase this business. You want to know what kind of policies they have in place already that all the employees are following. And if they have a current plan, you probably want to look at that plan, maybe make some revisions, make it your own, make sure there's buy-in from all the folks who are helping to run that business.
Right.
And I mean, I would also make sure that, it is supposed to be open. I mean, I could see how some businesses that are not supposed to open yet may have opened with a lot of cautions and start thinking, well, we can,
Right.
we can get away with it. No one's told
Right.
us not to open. But you kind of want to make sure you're going to be more visible as you reopen. You're going to want to do some type of event or something because you're on the new management, maybe not. So you really want to make sure that you're supposed to be open and that you have all of the appropriate PPE equipment, all of the appropriate discussions, signage, and everything else that you need in your store.
Right, and it's an excellent point when you were talking about businesses, whether your business is supposed to be open. So we're in phase 3 right now. We're not in phase 4. And so in the last 2 weeks, there has been clarification regarding what it means to serve food, because bars, which are not able to open until phase 4, which phase 4 is when a vaccine is developed, bars were serving popcorn and pretzels and chips, and saying that they now fell into the restaurant exception and that they were able to open under phase 3. So that regulation got clarified to talk about what it means to have prepared food on site in order to have businesses that were trying to find a way around. I believe there is a legal challenge going up against that interpretation, which is why I say it's really important to stay tuned in, check the Commonwealth's COVID-19 website for updates. You can sign up to have updates sent to your phone. The local online newspapers, and there's a lot of resources out there, but I would minimally be sure that I'm really following the state's COVID-19 site.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And your contact information is on the screen. Folks can feel free to contact you if they have any further questions. We really appreciate you taking 2 hours of your Thursday morning to do this webinar for us. We're really thankful to you for that. Thank you so much. And for those of you who want to contact me as well, you can reach out to me via the MSPDC, and you should be getting an email, mspdc@mspdc.umass.edu. You can send a message there and we can get connected. So thanks everybody, and thank you, Sarah, so much for today.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Time.
Bye-bye.